Today in Luther's Kitchen, I'm making easy artisan bread. It's gonna look super fancy and taste super delicious, and it's ridiculously easy. So in a very large container, I've combined some unbleached all-purpose flour with a little bit of whole wheat flour. So I use 6 cups of all-purpose flour and half a cup of whole wheat flour, followed by 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. And now I'm going to slowly stream in some water that is about 110 degrees, so it should feel a little bit hotter than a bath. And I am using 3 cups for this amount of flour. And once the flour and water have been added together, I like to let it hang out for about 2 minutes before I add the salt. I just want the yeast and the water to first start to formulate before dropping in a tablespoon and a half of kosher salt. From this point, I mix everything so that there are no dry pockets and I don't see any more loose flour, but I don't have to go crazy. I'm not kneading the dough. And now I'm going to cover it, but I'm going to leave a corner vented so that the air has a place to escape to. I'm going to leave this on the counter for 2 hours. And after 2 hours, look at that growth. It's beautiful. All those bubbles. That means goodness. Now I'm going to park it in the fridge where it's going to hang out for 24 hours. And now my dough has been sitting in the fridge. It's time to make my first loaf. So I'm only using half of that dough because I can put the rest of that dough in the refrigerator and it'll last for up to 2 weeks. This is the hardest part. This part, you don't want to overwork the dough. I only want to fold the dough maybe 4 to 6 times. I want to be very careful not to deflate all of that beautiful bubbled growth that occurred in the fridge and on the counter. And then once I have folded the dough, and I'm trying really hard not to push down, I'm going to roll it into a smooth ball so that I can let it proof in a proofing basket, or you can let it proof in a bowl, or you could just let it proof on a sheet pan. Just make sure that you dust to the bottom of the pan with either some cornmeal or flour so it doesn't stick. So here's my proofing basket. And I like using the proofing baskets because they usually leave that pretty indentation on the bread, and it's a nice place to park the dough while you're giving it its next rise. So this has to hang out for another couple hours until the dough has doubled in size, and I'm going to prepare now my Dutch oven. So I'm going to put some parchment paper at the bottom of the Dutch oven, otherwise the bread's going to stick. 2 hours have passed and my dough has risen beautifully. This, again, is another hard part. You don't want to deflate all of that air that's developed. So carefully, I'm going to flip the dough out onto that piece of parchment paper without pushing down on the dough. And then I'm going to put that into the Dutch oven. My oven is preheating to 450 degrees. This has to bake at a very high hot temperature. And the purpose of using the Dutch oven is to create steam so you get a nice crust. I'm using a very sharp serrated knife to make sure that I score the bread. And now I'm gently gonna drop the bread into the Dutch oven. I don't preheat it. Other recipes say to preheat it, but I get nervous that I'm gonna burn myself that way. So that Dutch oven is not hot. And then I'm gonna put the lid on, and this is gonna bake for about 25 to 30 minutes. When it starts to turn golden brown on the top, you need to remove the lid. Same temperature, oven should still be at 450 degrees. You can see some steam was released. Slide that puppy back in, and it's gonna continue to bake for another 15 minutes or until it is browned on top. And if you kind of poke it with your finger, you can feel that it's crunchy. Oh my gosh, this is the best bread ever. Look at that, crunch, crunch. And then just to slice into it is heaven. You really should wait until the bread has had a chance to cool. But if it all worked, then the inside of your bread should be fully cooked. There should be some holes in the bread, and it should bounce back when you push on it. For this recipe and more, visit myclasscancook.com.